So as a quick overview, Cyrus, his death date is contested as to when he actually dies, but it's somewhere around 530. So shortly, not a long time after taking over Babylon. But the overview of Ezra and Nehemiah consists of three major groups. And there's a lot going on here, but for the most part, you have him sending Zerubbabel back. Then you have
a good Babylonian name.
A good name from Babylon.
Literally means born in Babylon.
And then we have Nehemiah, who's going to go back to build the walls. So this is why we often call the temple the second building of the temple, because the first one was Solomon, and the second one is often referred to as Zerubbabel's temple. And so he's going to help build the altar and the temple. Ezra's there to help with some of that effort. And then later on, so he's going to bring back a lot of the gold and silver and the precious things to put into the temple. And then Nehemiah is going to rebuild the walls and the gates. So that's kind of your overview of where we are. And then in next week's lesson, we're going to talk about Esther, who is in the palace at Shushan, up in Media, the capital. So she is the last of our books in the history portion of the Bible. So we'll get that lesson next week with the story of Esther. So let's jump into chapter 1 of Ezra, where you get introduced to Cyrus here, this king. And it says, "Now in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, that the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah might be fulfilled, the Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, that he made a proclamation throughout all his kingdom and put it also into writing." So you'll notice that the Lord is doing his work, once again, through a non-Israelite. He's not in the covenant family, but it doesn't stop God from having this powerful connection with him. "Thus saith Cyrus, king of Persia, the Lord God of heaven hath given me all the kingdoms of the earth, and he hath charged me to build him an house at Jerusalem, which is in Judah." I love that. The Lord has told me I need to build up a house to him, a temple in Judah, in Jerusalem. And so he then asks the question, "Who's among you of all of his people? His God be with him, and let him go up to Jerusalem, which is in Judah, and build the house of the Lord God of Israel. And whosoever remaineth in any place where he sojourneth, let the men of his place help him with silver and with gold and with goods and with beasts." Basically, he's saying, I have no idea how to build your temple. Is there anybody in this group who knows what they're doing? I will help you, and you can gather all the resources you need, and we'll help you make this happen. And as Taylor mentioned, most of the people by this time, 50 years after being taken away from Jerusalem, they're saying, no, actually, I kind of like my new home, maybe my farm or my surroundings, whatever I'm living in here in Babylonian exile. I'm comfortable. There's a lot of work to do back in Jerusalem.
Babylon is extremely wealthy. It's well-watered, incredible farmland. It's diverse. They had all the goods of the world there. All the trade routes go through. And if you look at where Jerusalem is, it's off the major trade routes. It's not really close to anything. And the walls are destroyed. You have to lug everything up 3,000 feet up the mountainside to get the resources in. It's a lot of work. So people became very comfortable living in Babylon versus let's go out into the wilderness, let's go through the wilderness and get up to Jerusalem and have this enormous work of not just building the temple, but building city walls is an enormous undertaking. I've been to Israel, and some of these city walls are just massive. And I think about just trying to put a fence around my house and how little effort I really want to put in to get it done. So we don't really know all the motivations of why some Jews went back and some stayed in Babylon, but it's significant that good leaders build houses dedicated to God. It's fascinating that Cyrus does this, but we see that Nehemiah and Zerubbabel, when they come into power, they want to build a temple, like King David wanted to do. Eventually Solomon did. I think what's going on today, we have leaders who are building temples to God. Across human history, people dedicated to God, particularly leaders, marshal resources and people to build temples to God. And in some ways, I see that as one of the major themes of Ezra and Nehemiah. How do we build a temple to our God in the face of our poverty, of opposition, internal strife? How do we do God's work when things are very difficult?
Which, by the way, today you'll notice the prophet isn't asking us to put on our hard hats and get our shovels and picks and hammers and go and build temples. It's all taken care of for us. All of this heavy labor that these people had to do back then, that's all done. Now what our prophets are asking us to do is to maybe step away from our Babylons of prosperity with matters of time and resources, to be able to spend some time sacrificing for the Lord and for our loved ones on the other side of the veil, as well as on this side of the veil, in serving in the temple. Maybe not to build the temple, but to build a temple of testimony inside of us. So it's a slightly different sacrifice needing to be made, but it is a sacrifice nonetheless. So you'll notice that some people step forward, some chiefs of the tribes of Judah and Benjamin, and they volunteer. And they get the gold and the silver and the beasts and all the precious things to go. And then verse 7 tells you that Cyrus the king brought forth the vessels of the house of the Lord, which Nebuchadnezzar had taken out of Jerusalem, out of the temple, and he returns it all.
These are like trophies. In the ancient world, if a people were conquered, one of the signs that they had been conquered was that their religious symbols would be put in the temple of the gods of the conquering army. These were trophies. Trophies to show that your group that is now lost has to submit to us. And here, Cyrus, instead of dominating and say, look, I have all your sacred elements in my holy house to whatever God I'm worshiping, he's saying, I am giving you back all of your sacred things so you can build back to God. Really just so interesting that Cyrus, this Gentile, he is in tune enough with the Spirit of God. He realizes if you want to build a peaceful and prosperous society, you center on God, you love God, and you love your neighbor. And Cyrus did this. He loved people enough to say, I'm going to support you guys in flourishing in the ways that will help draw you closer to God.